Hey traders, it is officially November. Welcome to the end of the year. It has been an incredibly bullish year, and it's hard to imagine that we could keep going. It's also hard to imagine that we could get even more bullish than we have been. But if we look at seasonal tendencies, then we can see that November actually marks the beginning of the most bullish 3 consecutive months in a row of the year. November, December, January tend to be very bullish. Now, I've been very bullish this year, and yet when I look at the past, when I look at my trades, I find myself saying, gosh, I haven't been bullish enough. It's kind of crazy to think about. So I definitely intend on continuing my bullish stance, and I might even get a little bit more aggressive than I have been just to really capitalize off of this seasonal trend that we tend to see between Halloween and the new year, or even into January. So let's take a look at the SPX. I want to talk about where to buy the dip when price does pull back, when and if you should ever short this market at all, and then we'll also take a look at some individual tickers and look for some good entries there as well. So let me, before we get started, I want to just point out a couple of things on this chart just so that you know what I'm looking at. So this blue moving average right here, this light blue cyan, that is the daily 8. The green one right here, that is the daily 21. And then down here, this lonely moving average is the daily 50. So it's been ignored for quite a while. Even when we got this little pullback a couple of weeks ago, price came close but didn't quite hit it. So when I am looking for a pullback in a normal market, what I typically like to do is wait for a pullback to the daily 21. But if we look at this chart right here, you can see it has not been coming up very often. Usually comes up only about every 2 to 3 weeks. Sometimes it takes even longer. If we take a look at July, we see that it didn't hit the daily 21 once for that entire month. It went from June 23rd, and you had to wait all the way until August 1st before price hit the daily 21 again. So right now, the daily 8, that's the new daily 21. You can see that price has been riding it pretty much all year, ever since we got that tariff tantrum back in March and April. Price has just been riding the daily 8, and that has been really a pretty consistent support and a pretty consistent spot to buy the dip. Now, if we just look at the last couple of days in October, you can see that we did get a pullback from these highs. We hit new all-time highs, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 days in a row before we pulled back. Now, this is particularly impressive to me, and let me tell you why. The last day of the month tends to see a little bit more selling pressure than what we actually got as traders are closing out their positions. So the fact that we not only hit the daily 8 and held, but we actually bounced off of it a little bit, that has me really, really optimistic into this first week in November. Going back to seasonal tendencies, the first week in November tends to be incredibly bullish. So I intend on playing the market only to the long side, unless I see something different come up, but I don't think I will. I intend this first week in November to play the long side in SPX, and I'm going to get pretty aggressive. I actually think that we could hit 7,000 this week. We came pretty close on Wednesday. We hit 69.20. That is our current all-time high. So I want to see if we can bust through that this week and actually hit 7,000. Now, if you recall, most traders, myself included, have been calling for 7,000 to be the all-time high target of 2025 into the end of the year. I think we're going to have to come up with a new target because like I mentioned, I think we're probably going to hit it this week. If we don't hit it this week, I think we should definitely see it before Thanksgiving. So I'll talk about some targets above 7,000, but before I do, let's talk about when or if you should short this market. Now, a few rules of thumb that I personally have. Number one, I'm not going to short individual tickers. If I feel like we have a pullback coming, I'm going to do it in the SPX. Occasionally, you might see me do it in the Qs as well, which is the ETF, QQQ. That's the ETF for the NASDAQ, but typically I like to stick to SPX. That's kind of my bread and butter. So if I decide that I do want to short SPX, it needs to hit 3 different things in order for me to go ahead and go short. Number one, it needs to have hit an all-time high somewhere between 3 and 5 days in a row. This is what we saw this past week, where we hit a new all-time high 4 days in a row. That tends to be what is typical of this year, of 2025. Past years, we usually wouldn't hit more than 2 all-time highs in a row. This year, we've been seeing 3, 4, and 5 all-time highs in a row. So that's number one, needs to do that, at least 3 all-time highs in a row. Number two, I want to see some sort of seasonal tendency within the Stock Traders Almanac that says, okay, this particular day or this particular week statistically is bearish. So that's number two. It needs to line up with that as well. Number three, I want to see some type of a major economic event which could actually act as a catalyst to pull price down. Now, ahead of economic events, we never know how the market is going to respond. But when we have a major economic event coming up, like CPI, PCE, sometimes it might be a rate announcement, or Powell is just giving a press conference. When that lines up with those other 2 things that I just mentioned, a lot of times that can be the catalyst that is needed to pull price back down. So those 3 things need to hit in order for me to even put on a bearish position. If we're really extended above the daily 8, I think the daily 8 is a good place to target. But if we're riding that, if we're sitting right on top of that daily 8, then I might look for something a little bit deeper, like the daily 21. All right, so let's talk about some targets above 7,000, because like I mentioned, I do think that that is going to hit. So what are my new targets for the rest of 2025? Well, I've got some fibs on right here. You can see that we have a 2618 extension up here at 7104. Also happens to be a major psychological level. That makes perfect sense to me. If we hit 7,000, especially this week, absolutely think we can go up another 100 points before the end of the year. Do I have anything above that? Yep, I have another 1618. Now that is just from this high right here that we hit on Wednesday to this low that we hit. This was a big, nasty sell-off. This was another mini tariff tantrum that we hit on October 10th. So running those fibs right there, I have a 1618 extension up at 7148. Another major psychological level, 7150. If I scrunch this down just a little bit more, ooh, I've got another 2618. It's from that same fib that I just mentioned up here at 7518. I don't really think we're going to hit that in 2025, but I am looking forward to hitting it whenever that may be. All right, so now that we've covered the SPX, let's go over some individual tickers that have been really, really strong and some high flyers, and see what I'm looking for in those. Now, first I want to take a look at Palantir, which actually has earnings coming up on Monday after the bell. It's pretty high up there. Look at how far away from the daily 8 it is. I would have a hard time playing this one ahead of earnings because anything could happen. But let's say traders don't like the report that is released and price falls back. The first spot that I'm going to look for is this daily 8 at 191.5. It'll probably be a little bit higher on Monday, but you could even call it, 195 or 192.93. If it continues lower, 185, which is where the daily 21 is, ooh, that would be a gift. If we could get a pullback there, that would be a gift. I have a sneaking suspicion, though, it's not going to go that far. Let's throw some fibs on while we're here. I'm just going to go from this high on Friday to this most recent pivot low. And if we look at some levels above, we have 212, 217, and 225, which is the 1618 extension just from this move right here. I actually really like that. And I'm curious to see, I didn't look this up ahead of time, but I will on Monday once the market opens. I'm curious to see what the expected move is for this week in Palantir, because if it says that it's about 25 points, well, that makes perfect sense to me. All right, next on my list, I've got Google, who already did report. And traders definitely liked what they heard because it shot up here to 291. I'd love to see it hit 300, but I think what's going to have to happen first is it's going to need to rest for just a minute. So either it needs to come down to this daily 8, which is at about 270 right now, or it needs to trade sideways for a few days while that daily 8 rises up to meet it. Now, if that happens, we could see some intraday squeezes start to develop, and that could make things really interesting as well. You want to throw some fibs on here? Sure, why not? Okay, recent all-time high to this recent pivot low. We have some extensions up at 304. That makes perfect sense. 312 and then 326. Those looks like some nice juicy targets for me. The question remains, where will we enter long? 270 looks like a good spot to me, or if we can just trade sideways, develop some intraday squeezes while those moving averages can catch up. Either one of those scenarios sounds really good to me. Next up, we have NVIDIA. This is another one that is so high up there. It's just floating above this daily 8. So look, I'm going to say the same thing about NVIDIA that I did about Google. I either want it to come down to this daily 8, which is currently at 196, or I want it to trade sideways, develop some intraday squeezes while we wait for these moving averages to catch up to price. Next targets for NVIDIA. I've got 220, 225, and 234. And then the last one that I want to look at with you is Broadcom, AVGO. Now it hit an all-time high at 386, and look at this. It actually has pulled back to the daily 8 already, and it actually bounced. So assuming that price is still in this area on Monday at the open, I think I'm going to have to pick it up here because this looks really good to me. Doesn't have any squeezes. I would love to see it develop some squeezes, but even if it doesn't, we know as much as I love a squeeze, price doesn't need a squeeze to continue higher. A squeeze only helps it fire even further once that squeeze does fire. So it's not a deal breaker. I love it when there's a squeeze, and that's typically what I'm looking for, but it's not a deal breaker for me. This looks like a great entry, assuming that price stays in this area on Monday. All right, that's all I've got for you today, but Have a great week. I will see you in the trading room. If you want to join me in the small lot trading room at Simpler Trading, I'm going to drop a link down below in the caption, so you make sure to check that out. You can hang out with me for 30 days and only be charged $7 for that first 30-day trial. I'd love to see you in there. Have a great day, traders.